You know when you are agonizing over that one right thing to say to win somebody over or to get the answer that you want? What if I told you it wasn't one thing, but it was the way that you used consistency to your advantage? Years ago, when I was at Mariners spring training, Ken Griffey Jr. made his return to the team. Now, he had been with the team previously, then he played for a couple other teams, but he was back to finish his career with Seattle. I had not worked for the Mariners broadcast team in his first go-around in Seattle, so on my first day into training camp, I walked up and I introduced myself. And I said, "Hey Ken, my name is Jen, and I work for the TV station affiliated with the team. And at some point, I would love to sit down and have an interview with you." And Ken Griffey Jr. looked at me and he said, "I'm not talking to you today." And I said, "Oh, no, that's okay. I didn't mean that you had to talk to me today. Just at some point in the next 10 days when I'm here, I would love to talk to you." And he just kind of dismissed me. And the next day I walked into the clubhouse and I said, "Hey, Ken." And he looked at me and said, "I'm not talking to you today." And this continued every day for 7 days. And at that point, I'm starting to get pretty nervous about my ability to secure this interview, which, by the way, was a pretty big deal that I needed to get done. And just about the time I started to wonder how I was going to force him to do the interview, which, side note, you can't force anybody to do anything, certainly not an athlete to do an interview if they don't feel like doing the interview. I walk up to the clubhouse one day. Before I could even say anything, Ken comes out and he says, "Hey, Jen, I'm ready to do that interview now." I was so blown away, I couldn't even get to the fancy setup. We had the lights and the camera and the backdrop and everything. Couldn't even do that. All I could find was a brick wall, and I put him up against the brick wall and I asked him as many questions as I could think of off the top of my head. It was shocking to me, and after that day, I never had any problems getting him to talk to me or do an interview ever again. And several months into the season, I asked him, I said, "Ken, what gives? Like, why did you change your mind? And why didn't you say yes in the beginning?" And he looked at me and he said, "Jen, I didn't know you. I didn't know if I could trust you, and I didn't know if I liked you." Which I thought was a pretty reasonable answer. Now, here's what I did all of those days that he told me no. I stood there with all the other reporters. I didn't say anything. I was allowed to be in the clubhouse. I stood with all the other reporters. If he talked about scuba diving or learning to fly a plane or talked about his kids or talked about anything else, I was there to listen to it. And I just was warming up the room in a way. I just was getting him used to seeing me in that space. And I let him know that it was important enough to me to be standing there even though he wasn't ready to talk to me. You know, it led to a great relationship with a Hall of Famer, and I was there for his Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and I was there for the party the night before. It was pretty cool, and I will never forget that. But here's what this means to you. If you are trying to nail one conversation, you're missing the point. It's not about one time. It's about the consistency of showing up every single day. And 15 seconds or 5 seconds or 10 seconds counts. Don't overlook that. If I wouldn't have walked up and said, "Hey, Ken," every day, I guarantee you he wouldn't have had the same response 7 or 8 days later. So make those small interactions count for you. But hey, that's just how I've gotten to where I am in my career. I'd love to hear how you've gotten to this point in your career. Why don't you leave it in the comments?